we did. Not like this we did.
Greetings, curious cats, and welcome to Curiosity Feeds the Cat. Now, today I have a special guest. You guys know how I love prehistoric animals and how, being a bit of an old fossil myself, I like fossils and I like paleontologists. And my guest today is a paleontologist I've been following for a number of years. His name is Alex Reubenstahl, and he kindly agreed to come on my show and basically talk about his work. So welcome, Alex, and thank you very much for agreeing to do this.
I'm happy to be here. Excited to chat.
Thank you.
Yeah, a good introduction. I'm Alex, and I'm a PhD candidate at Yale University. So I've been there for 4 or 5 years, but active researcher. I'm published in the literature and all that good stuff,
Okay.
field work, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Fantastic. So you said you're a PhD student. How long does it usually take then to actually finish your PhD?
It depends on your institution. Our school here at Yale, the average is about 6 years.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's all right.
That's a long time.
So it's basically insured employment. But right, because like a PhD program, at least here, you're not paying for it. They pay.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So how does that work?
Programs are often you'll have a grant or something in the States, but sometimes you don't. But PhD programs, they are paying you a stipend to do your work.
Wow. Okay, so that's interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of like a job, a little.
So it's kind of like a job, and then does that guarantee you employment when you're finished?
It helps. It doesn't necessarily guarantee you after you finish your PhD. What's customary is that you'll go on into a position that's called a postdoc, which is just your postdoctoral work.
Okay.
Which is usually 2 years at an institution that's pretty straight research.
Okay.
And you might do a few of these following graduation, so kind of these 2-year stints before you attempt to find a more long-term position in a museum or in a university, which is usually where you kind of set down for at least a while. Okay,
for a while. That's fascinating. So, just out of curiosity, how did you get into paleontology? I mean, was it an interest for you as a child?
Yeah, I was always kind of into the natural world as a kid, and I swung back and forth between I really liked snakes and reptiles, and there was a part of my life where I really liked deep sea marine life. And if I made a mess of it in paleontology, I would thinking, I'll always do deep sea marine life, except I guess.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's interesting.
Mild fear of the dark and enclosed spaces. So I don't know if I'd go. I don't know. Those always seemed interesting, but there have been. I don't know. My parents have always told me multiple stories about where it came from, but because it's something I've been into since I was very small. The probably kind of formative period was my mother used to work in the in Manhattan, and she would bring me into work with her because my father also worked. So I'd go into work with her. She worked in the textile industry, but around lunch, we would very often walk to the American Museum of Natural History, and I'd just wander around for like hours.
And you'd be in a world of your own, so to speak.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Which is still my favorite. I've seen a lot of museums, and the American Museum in New York is still my favorite.
Oh, I've never been.
It's incredible.
I've seen videos, and obviously I've read a lot of articles, but it's probably one of the things I'm hoping to go to America next year, because I have friends who've invited me, so I definitely want to go. I've been to obviously the museum in London, and I went to that's a good one, and I went to the Natural History Museum in Paris 2 years ago, and that was awesome. And I'll delve into that in a little while, because I literally was like a child in a toy store when I went to the one in Paris. So you mentioned that you had an interest in deep sea animals. I was quite struck by that because it's almost weird that every time I find something new about the fauna that exists at the bottom of the ocean, it's almost like an alien world, isn't it?
Yeah, I think if I had to psychoanalyze myself, I think the appeal of deep sea life is similar to the appeal of prehistoric life in that it's
Of
kind of
course,
like
of course, of
it's
course.
on the knife's edge of the unknown, whereas like the past is, kind of a lot of the past is going to ultimately be unknowable, and a
Hmm.
lot of the deep sea feels like it's unknowable, but at least we have it a bit more on hand.
Well, yeah. I mean, and also the thing is that we haven't even scratched the surface of what exists
Right.
in the deepest recesses of the ocean. And so I'm like you, I'm fascinated by it, but I just don't have the time to
Yeah.
because I'm just crazy about all of it. So since you've so okay, let me just get this right. So
Mhm.
you liked paleontology as a child, and then you just made a conscious decision to study it. Now, what is your specific discipline,
Sure.
or
Yeah.
specialty, if you like?
Um, I guess the conscious decision I made, I think, kind of emerged in well, high school here, so grades like 9 through 12.
Okay.
But before that, it was always an interest. But in terms of like an actual academic pursuit, so I did my undergraduate work in Washington D.C. Um, and I did a bachelor's of science in both geology and biology, which is
Okay.
if
Wow.
you want to be a paleontologist, you should
Yeah.
do that's what you should do. A
Hmm.
lot of not many places offer undergraduate degrees in paleontology, and a broad background in that in biology, geology, and also like writing. You should know how to
Hmm.
write. It's annoying and hard to write, but it's a good thing to learn. Um, and then I did a master's at the same institution at George Washington with my first advisor, Jim Clark, who's a fantastic paleontologist. Uh,
Okay.
he does a lot of work on early crocodiles and also silurisaurs.
Oh, wow.
And then from there, I came to Yale. And so currently, my focus of my focus of research is similar to Jim's in that a lot of my current or past focus has been on early crocodile evolution.
Oh,
Now I'm
okay.
kind of
That's
shifting gears. Not,
okay.
I still have crocodile stuff going on because I like crocodiles. Crocodilians, the extinct ones, are much more. They're very different than what we have today. But I'm also doing a lot
Oh,
of work with theropods. So meat-eating dinosaurs, mostly the small birdie ones.
okay.
Things like Velociraptor and stuff like that. I have a lot of stuff going for.
I
One
see.
of the dinosaurs I helped name is a small dromaeosaur, Curricula, that came out.
Oh, I've never heard of that actually.
It's new. It's a little guy.
Okay.
And
And
then
where was it discovered?
well, it was excavated in kind of this pulse of field work that was happening in Mongolia in the 90s.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But it's kind of been a lot of that stuff is at the American Museum, and it's just kind of sitting on shelves because there's so much of it. So I went through it with a good friend of mine, James Napoli, who's the lead on that project. We worked on a description for it.
Fantastic.
And yeah, so more
That's
stuff like that. And then I've also so it's mostly what we would call archosaurs, the ruling reptile
Yeah,
group,
the ruling reptiles. Yes.
rocks, birds, dinosaurs, pterosaurs. The actual meaty part of my dissertation here is beyond just those interesting questions I have about some things about theropod dinosaurs. I'm doing a large project on the evolution of the palate bones across reptiles. So those are the
Oh,
bones that make
wow.
up the roof of the mouth.
Okay.
They're very fragile in some clades, so they don't preserve very often. So you need to use CT data to look at them if you're going to get them. And they're kind of this the skull is very studied because it has all these great systems in it, right? The
Hmm.
brain case, all the sharp bits with the teeth. But the palate's kind of often I find in the literature overlooked. So I'm hoping to flesh that out in a meaningful way, and that's what I do.
Wow.
That's what I spend a lot of my time working on here.
It's actually quite interesting that I followed you all these years, and I actually had no idea that your specialty was one of my favorite parts of paleontology, which is early crocodiles.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
sure, oh yeah, I'm sure you've seen me post about Sarcosuchus numerous times. Because
Yeah.
when I went to the Natural History Museum in Paris, one of the main reasons I actually went there is because I knew there was a specimen of Sarcosuchus there. And so I wanted to see it. I'm actually going to maybe add a little bit of a video to this interview after, because it was probably the most exciting time I've ever spent in a museum, because I just couldn't believe how huge it was.
Oh yeah,
I
it's enormous. It's enormous. Yeah, it's part of this weird group of crocs. They're called sometimes they're called Tethasuchians.
Okay, what does
So
that
they're
mean?
outside the right. So living croc, right? You have gators and
Okay.
crocs, and then gharials, which are closer to crocodiles than they
Mm.
are to alligators. And you get big things. So like there's Deinosuchus, which is
Dinosuchus, yeah.
really just a really big alligatorid. And there's
Mm.
Pursugus, which is a huge caiman.
Yeah,
Um,
Purosaurus. That's in Brazil,
Purosaurus,
from
thank you.
Brazil. Yeah, from
Yes, yeah.
Brazil. Yeah.
The crown, what we call the crown, is not where I do most of my work.
Okay.
But Sarcosuchus is part of this kind of earlier radiation of things called Tethasuchians. So it's kind of this archaic giant monster. It's very fun. The crocodiles I do most of my work on are about that big.
Oh, okay.
And still when they're running around on long legs in the Triassic. I did a long monograph for my master's thesis on Jungursuchus sloani, which you can
Okay.
read,
I'm.
which can be freely accessed.
Okay. Well, please. I mean, by all means, send me some links, because I read a lot from a website called ThoughtCo,
Mhm.
and they do a fantastic breakdown of archosaurs and even the reptiles that preceded dinosaurs, and then they do early crocodiles.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, so you get things like Opertosuchus, which is one of the really really early ones, and you get weird guys like what's it, Armadillosuchus.
Yeah, no, there's so many weird people.
There's a weird one. Carnifex was the one that supposedly was bipedal.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, that's a nice early one. That one's from North Carolina, I think.
yes, yes, they call it the North Carolina Butcher. I mean, it really. I would love to just be a fly on your shoulder while you're doing your work, because I had no idea actually that the diversity of crocodilians, in fact, probably superseded the ones of dinosaurs before dinosaurs came to the fore. I this is something I only discovered probably about 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, that so in terms of just morphological diversity, they're doing almost everything dinosaurs do except fly in the Triassic.
Okay.
So there's these kind of low slung etosaurs, which are herbivorous armored crocodiles in the Triassic.
I'm
Things
familiar
like
with them.
Postdoc, kind of your big theropod stand-ins, but there's also things like Ephygia,
Okay,
which
yeah,
are
I've read about that.
bipedal crocodiles that have beaks, well, crocodilian relatives.
Okay,
So you get
is that an etosaur? Because etosaurs have beaks, right?
no, not an etosaur. Unlike etosaurs, which do kind of have these like little kind of shovel-like faces,
Mm-hmm.
etosaurs have teeth. Ephygia doesn't have
Ah,
any teeth. It's basically a ornithomimosaur by way of crocodiles.
oh.
Bizarre. Then they're here for like apparently not a long time, and then by the end of the Triassic, they're gone.
It is very bizarre, because when I started learning about these early crocodiles, and you had such a variety. What was the one that really got me was Carprosuchus, the boa croc.
That one's
So you
fun.
had, yeah, that was fun. Dog croc, there was the one that's, it's gone out of my head now.
So so Paul Sereno, who had a great National Geographic article in like 2009.
Yeah, I read it.
I remember reading. He does a lot of this really great croc stuff from Africa and South America. Stuff
Yeah,
we
yeah.
this group that we call Notosuchians. And they're really interesting because if there were like acts to the croc life, the story of crocodilians, there's the Triassic story.
Okay.
There's this huge mass extinction at the end of the Permian.
Okay.
It's the worst extinction in Earth's history.
Yes.
What recovers from that are archosaurs, but not even dinosaurs at first. It's as these early crocodilians, which most of which then die by the Jurassic.
Okay.
And then as you get into the Cretaceous, there's this the second pulse of crocodilian diversity in these Notasuchians, and these are the things that Paul, like the Caprasuchus, Stomatosuchus, which is a big flat pancake duck
Yeah.
crocodile.
Yeah, it's called pancake croc. Yeah,
Yes.
I remember that now.
Auripasuchus, which I think they nicknamed like rat croc. It's this little
Yes.
running guy, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And they're all over the place. And they're especially diverse in the Southern Hemisphere, which at the time may have been kind of limited in dispersal. So South America could have been its own isolated landmass. And it has all these fantastic predatory crocodiles and strange dinosaur faunas that are completely unlike those in North America you get at the time.
And this was before dinosaurs. So do we actually know?
I'm sorry. So all those, the boar crocs, the pancake crocs, the rat crocs, those coexist with dinosaurs.
Okay, fantastic.
They're hanging out. There's the Triassic stuff that coexists with only the very first dinosaurs.
Okay.
They go extinct. It's believed that the kind of spaces in the environment left when they went extinct are what dinosaurs then diversify out into. But there's room apparently in the environment for more diverse crocodiles later on, because they do evolve some interesting diversity a second time.
For some, that's really, really interesting. And I just wanted to say that most people don't realize that crocodilians and dinosaurs, some crocodilians anyway, coexisted with dinosaurs, which brings me to my next question, which is faunal succession is fundamental to paleontology, right?
Oh yeah.
And so is geology. Now, can you just explain so my viewers might understand, why is it that geology and the principle of faunal succession is fundamental to the work that you do?
Sure. So geology, right? So paleontology is kind of the intersection of biology and geology, in that we're studying ancient life, which is the biology part, but that life is preserved in stone, and is most of the time literally is stone. It has been replaced by the surrounding rock. So geology is fundamental for a few things. First and foremost, it's fundamental to finding the fossils. If you want to find, say you have questions about the early evolution of crocodiles or dinosaurs or stuff like that, and you want to, like, I want to go dig up, I want to go, how do you find a dinosaur, I guess is the question. Yes, is the question here. So we live in a time, fortunately for us, in which much of the surface rock of the Earth has been mapped. And we have a rough idea, you can look up a geological map of any given country and it'll be like, oh, this is all rock of X type that's supposedly this million years old. I only say supposedly because sometimes the dates need to be refined, because sometimes they're dated decades and decades prior, and you'll get there and you'll be like, oh, okay, this makes more sense than we thought, or it doesn't. But what you're looking for when you're looking for fossils, especially large something like a dinosaur, is you need sedimentary rocks. These are rocks that are deposited by depositional processes. So running water, kind of the settling of silt in lakes, the deposition of minerals by marine organisms in the ocean. They can be slow processes, they can be fast processes. A lot of great dinosaur fossils come from these floodplains, these regional floodplains where you just get washes, and you'll get like a bunch of animals, or things that take a long time to precipitate, like things in the famous site that Archaeopteryx and Compsognathus are from, which were from these lagoon bottoms where there's no oxygen. But anyway, so you get the rock, you need to be able to identify what kind of rock type you're looking for. So things like limestones, sandstones, mudstones, things that are made by these processes. And then
in the presence of water, obviously.
Yes, and you can have, on rare occasion, sedimentary processes that don't depend on water. So
Okay.
sand dunes, for example, and also sometimes ash.
Yeah, I'm
Volcanic
familiar.
ash, which is very rare, but it does happen. And amber too. So there are exceptions, but it's usually water-driven processes.
Okay.
And this actually is why there are biases in the fossil record, which is it's very rare to preserve upland biomes. So mountains, our understanding of what the fossil record looks like in mountains is much less robust than our understanding of, coast, swamps, lowlands, because there's less collecting of sediments and there's more eroding of sediments.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
I see what you mean.
It's not impossible. Sometimes you'll get like an upland lake where animals have fallen into, and that will preserve. But it is rarer. Anyway, so you need to know what kind of rock you're looking for. So if it can make a fossil, right? Because lava flows don't make fossils; they make ash and dust.
Yeah.
And you don't want metamorphic rocks, the stuff that comes from mountains, because, well, it's being subjected to heat and pressure, and it will deform and destroy fossils.
And destroy fossils, yes.
And sometimes I've seen trilobites that have been like twisted and sheared by metamorphic stress. So it happens. So that's all well and good. You have this is a fossiliferous rock, but there's a lot of fossiliferous rock. And if you want a dinosaur, we now have a pretty good understanding that it's almost impossible to find a dinosaur outside of 230 and 66 million years ago. And when I say almost impossible, it's only because there's probably like 236 million years ago is when dinosaurs are showing up. So we're missing the very, very early stuff. And it's possible, like, a handful of dinosaurs survived for a few thousand years after the asteroid hit. But that's your time window.
Okay.
So you need dates. And this is something that gets talked about a lot when people discuss Tiktaalik, which is this very famous transitional tetrapod, which was Neil Shubin kind of made.
Neil Shubin's work, yes.
Yes, great. Neil's a fantastic paleontologist. This is going to sound like a criticism. It's not. But he did this whole press thing where he's like, oh, we had a hypothesis. We knew if we wanted to find the transition of this, we know it would be in rocks this old, and they would have to be of this type. And he's like, and what do you know? We were right. And, this is cool. He found it. But every paleontologist that reads that is like, yeah, Neil, yeah, that's how you find any fossil you're looking for. You're not going in blind. I mean, very early on, people were going, like in the 1920s. You would show up to a place and hope, and you'd find what you'd find. But by this point, you're checking your maps, you're checking historical documents, and then ages. So the way things are, pardon me, the way things are dated in geology, historically, there's a whole school. There's this whole very interesting history to geochronology. There are things called relative. There's a process called relative dating, which is dating things based on kind of the order that they appear in the rock record. This is relative because these dates are. This is relative to this, and this is based on the law of superposition, which is that a rock layer on top is going to be younger than a rock layer below it because that had to be laid down first.
Yeah.
And then another one on top of it. This is almost always the case. There are a handful of exceptions where you will get tectonic activity that rotates rock layers. But what's cool is that you can actually figure out when this has happened because, there's sedimentary rocks, and even sometimes in lavas, you can see which ways the grains settle.
Oh, okay.
So if it's a sandstone, sometimes you'll have larger coarse grains on the bottom and fine grains on the top. But if it's rotated, you'll have big grains on the top, which doesn't make a lot of sense.
Okay.
So there are things we can look for, but in the overwhelming majority of times, younger on top, older on bottom. So that's relative dating. And you can look at fossils that are in these rock layers and their occurrence across the world and the order of which they occur, which is faunal succession, which we'll talk about in a second. That's relative dating. Which is fine. It's kind of how we built the outline for the geological rock record. Like all the periods and eras were kind of named from this.
Yes,
Jurassic, Cretaceous,
I'm
etc.
I'm aware of this.
But then we have absolute dating, which is much better. And that is using the decay of radioisotopes
Okay.
to give what we call precise, or to give numerical dates to events. So for this, you mostly need igneous rocks, things that are produced volcanically, which presents an issue in that fossils aren't usually preserved in igneous
Yeah.
rock.
Yeah.
So you need them. You need igneous layers, so like lava flows or ash tufts. If you're lucky, you'll get ash in a sedimentary layer, just little bits.
Okay.
Or if you're not, and most of the other time, what'll happen is your fossil layer will be bracketed by igneous layers. So that'll give you a
Ah.
range. So let's say this one's 74 million years ago. This one's 72. You know
Okay.
that fossil layer is between 74 and 72,
Mm-hmm.
which is not bad. It's a
No,
good way to date
it
things.
gives you an idea. Yes.
Yes, exactly. And an idea that is derived from a methodology. And simply put, how radioisotope dating works. So an isotope, right, is it's a heavier element.
Okay.
And they're unstable in that they decay radioactively.
Mm-hmm.
They split and they lose the alpha and beta particles. And they decay at known rates. So you'll have a starting bit of uranium 238, and it'll decay into lead.
Okay.
And this happens at an observed rate. And what we can do is, looking at the ratio of lead to uranium in a mineral from an igneous rock, usually a zircon, because zircons are very tough. They don't leak too much, and they're
Okay.
hard to deform. You can then use that to estimate the age backwards. How long would it take you to get that much lead versus that much uranium?
Yeah. So how much, basically, how much of what is left of each?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So we call it the parent and the daughter isotope.
And the daughter, yes.
And that's a pretty good way to date stuff. It's pretty hard to mess with. You can, and when it's messed with, there's evidence of it. So, for example,
Okay.
in zircon crystals that are often used for dating, if a lot of heat and pressure has been reapplied to them, which is something that could change the ratios, you'll see these little kind of lines around the crystal.
Oh, really?
These
Wow.
are zones where this temperature and pressure have changed and have resulted in kind of these different crystal zones. And then you can step heat these things to age those separate zones separately. I'm not a geochronologist. Paleontologists
That's
don't
fine.
usually, we don't do this part of the work. We will send our samples to labs that do this.
To labs that do the work for you. So it's
Yes.
essentially, the way I understood it is, in order for you to go and look for something, because there's so much time and money involved in trying to put on an expedition to go hunting for fossils, you actually need to know where you're going to look, because that's where you're expecting to find what you're looking for.
Yes. And there will always be surprises. So sometimes you'll go and you'll find nothing.
Of course. I mean, there's no guarantee that there's any fossils in any particular area. You just never know.
Yeah, I spent 3 weeks in South Africa, and
Oh wow.
found one dinosaur bone that we didn't even bother to remove because it was so poorly preserved. But then I've been in places like Lesotho and Yunnan, where you're there, there's just stuff falling out all over the place. Yeah, and then sometimes, very often, what's informative, we're not always going to know exactly how old, exactly what kind of fossil types are coming from somewhere. So you'll very often find things that surprise you.
Of course.
And what's very important to kind of expeditionary work is local notes. So, like, observations people made, just average people like 60 years ago, they're like, hey, I think I saw a bone here. And they'll have some geologist from the 1940s will have a note. It's like, someone thought they saw a bone here, and we'll be like, all right, maybe we'll go check that out.
So you get that as well. That's interesting.
Oh yeah, we did a field season in Lesotho. Oh god, like 5-6 years ago. And kind of there had been dinosaur bones known from Lesotho prior. but there was this report from I think he was a Jesuit missionary.
Okay.
Can Jesuits be missionaries? I might be a little ignorant on that, but
I don't know. I'm lost on that one.
But he had a bunch of notes, because a lot of the Jesuits are kind of are trained in the sciences to some degrees. And
Yeah,
he's like, hey, there are all these bones that look like dinosaur bones in the 1960s that are from here. Someone should probably check this out.
Wow.
And then 50, 60 years later, we came by. So yeah, stuff like that happens all the time. Stuff's found by accident during construction a lot. So in China, because they're doing so much infrastructure development, like they'll build highways, and they'll just find like incredible fossils.
Yeah, I know about the feathered dinosaurs from I think it's a volcanic layer in China, actually, isn't it? I can never pronounce it. Liaoning?
Yeah, so we call that the Yixian biota, but it's from Liaoning province.
Okay.
And
how'd you pronounce that?
Liaoning.
Liaoning.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always hurt.
Wrong, but
yeah, I always hurt myself when I try to pronounce that.
Yeah, so it's called the Jehol group, which is the successive layers, and then the specific fauna that not all, because there are earlier ones now, but a lot of the really nice feathered dinosaurs come from. That's called the Yixian.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was a lake. Actually, that, funny enough, that was probably a uplands high latitude lake. One of those fossil deposits that earlier, very rare. A lake that was upland and animals would die in, and had influence from a nearby volcano, because we have ash and stuff in it. So it's a fantastic.
So it's a rarity in two ways.
Oh yeah, it's kind of stupendous. It's also this very good reminder about the fossil record, which is it's chock full of like small animals.
Oh really? Okay.
Most of the Yixian biotas are, small animals, like little mammals, early mammals, frogs, strange things called crocodilians, and dinosaurs. But all the dinosaurs, not all of them, but most of the dinosaurs are maybe maximum 3 meters long, with the exception of Tyrannus, which is quite big. But it's something we talk about in paleontology a lot, called a preservational bias, which is this place is biased towards small animals, which is something you almost never get in other fossil sites, which tend to be biased towards kind of medium and big animals.
And big animals.
To preserve those skeletons. So, for example, like from the Morrison Formation here in the United States, where you have like over a dozen different kinds of sauropods, so long-necked dinosaurs, all these huge meat eaters, Stegosaurus. There are like maybe 3 small meat-eating dinosaurs, and they're each known from only one fossil, like one good fossil. And we as paleontologists, we don't see that and say, oh, I guess in the northern United States, there weren't a lot of small dinosaurs. We see that.
Well, you couldn't say that, could you? Because fossilization is such a rarity in the first place.
Exactly. Well, what places like the Jehol and the Yixian in China tell us is, oh, there were probably small dinosaurs and pterosaurs all over the place. They're just harder to preserve.
Yeah.
But yeah, actually, funny enough, tying back to the crocodile stuff, one of the early indications that the Yixian was probably kind of a temperate upland environment is that there are no crocs. And crocodiles, kind of the more recent looking crocodiles, are usually a very good indication of if you have a nice warm tropical climate. Okay. And
there were none there.
No, like everything else, turtles. If you went to a park in New England in the spring, you'd see everything except for the dinosaurs. Little mammals, these archaic birds, reptiles, but man, not a single crocodile.
Wow. So you mentioned that the size of dinosaurs and how there was a gradual evolution from small dinosaurs to larger dinosaurs, and a lot of people don't realize is for example, when creationists, for example, when they talk about dinosaurs, they just put all dinosaurs in one group, not realizing that through the fossil record there are the early dinosaurs and the late and mid dinosaurs, if you like, and even later ones. So could you just tell us, I mean, what are the examples of the earliest dinosaurs
Yeah, sure.
that we know of?
I think this can kind of tie into faunal succession, which
Yes,
I've kind of been dancing around a little bit. But
that's fine.
so faunal succession is this idea that as we look through the rock layer, as it is constructed from multiple sections all over the Earth, you don't have a lot of places in the world where you have almost every part of the Phanerozoic preserved.
Mm-hmm.
There are some, not all of them are fossiliferous layers, but there are parts where you get most of it. And then there are places where you get big chunks of it. So where we were digging in South Africa is a great example. It's called the Karoo Superbase.
Oh, I know. I know about the Karoo. I'm a big fan of the Karoo.
Perfect. So it goes from the Carboniferous to about the mid-Jurassic, which is a huge chunk of time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got fossils from almost all the way through. So in the story of dinosaurs, right, you have the big dying at the end of the Permian. All these strange mammal ancestors and relatives go extinct, except for the ones that will give rise to mammals, which persist, but they're much reduced in their importance and their size. The archosaurs take over. The Triassic is kind of the age of the strange crocodile relative.
Mm-hmm.
But in the background, dinosaurs are evolving. And these early dinosaurs are bipedal, generally small-bodied, so maybe 2-3 meters in general, and predatory to our understanding. And all of these early dinosaurs, figuring out the relationships with these early dinosaurs is very complicated because they all look the same.
Okay.
Which is exactly what you would expect of an evolutionary event if you were capturing it close to when it was happening. So we have early representatives for all these groups, early dinosaurs that would become like meat-eating dinosaurs, early members of the groups that would be plant-eating dinosaurs. Oh, hold on. Give me one moment. So yes, kind of these small-bodied, large, predatory, possibly omnivorous, bipedal animals, and they all look kind of the same early on, which is what, like I said, you would expect of an evolutionary event, but they're all a little different in ways that are kind of suggestive of the groups they would evolve into.
Okay.
You hit the end of the Triassic, there's another mass extinction, kind of this, what we call the Triassic-Jurassic mass extinction. It's not as big as the asteroid, it's not as big as the Permian. But a lot of these interesting crocodile relatives, they don't make it.
Yeah, that was about around about 210 million years or something like that.
Yeah, about 200.
Okay.
And it's possible that it's related to this huge volcanic episode called the Camp.
Yes.
Which is this big flood basalt.
Yes, Central Atlantic Magmatic Province.
Yes.
I think. Yeah.
Tons of gas released, climate change, all sorts of nasty stuff. And from there, from kind of that ecological collapse, dinosaurs that exist and persist, and why they persist and crocs don't persist is an interesting question that a lot of work's going into. They fill in those niches and radiate, and they become huge. And there were some pretty sizable dinosaurs in the late Triassic, but nothing that was like, you know, like a Apatosaurus or a Titanosaur. And so in the Jurassic, kind of early on, you get these very kind of small, primitive representations of later clades. Most dinosaurs have really great transitional series at this point.
Wow.
Things like ceratopsians, so like things like Triceratops, if you go back into the Jurassic, Triceratops is from the very end of the Cretaceous. If you go back into the Jurassic, you have little bipedal pig-sized ceratopsians that have just a little bit of a frill on the back of their head, but nothing else.
Oh, wow.
And if you keep going through the Cretaceous, the frills get bigger. Some of them become quadrupeds, and then you'll get your horned forms. So, and this is the case for most dinosaur groups have great records like this. There are some clades where we're still a little hazy on what the early members looked like pachycephalosaurs. We have them from the Cretaceous, but we don't have a great idea of what their earlier ancestors looked like. But they're kind of the exception to the emerging rule, which is this very good sampling.
That's amazing.
Evolution across the Mesozoic. And like faunal succession, so kind of the faunal succession of this is you're going from these crocodilian-dominated faunas, to dinosaur-dominated faunas. And there's a bit of an overlap.
Okay.
But within the dinosaur-dominated faunas, if you get more granular, you'll see faunal successions within those. So, for example, from the Jurassic to the Cretaceous, you're seeing stegosaurs all over the place in the Jurassic. And then ankylosaurs, which are closely related, they show up in the Jurassic, but they're small and they're never abundant. But at the end of the Jurassic, stegosaurs kind of fade out and ankylosaurs explode. And so by the end of the Cretaceous, no more stegosaurs, plenty of ankylosaurs. So there's all these kind of, and you can get down to like the species level.
I know it's mind blowing. I mean, I hear people. I've come across the expression that Stegosaurus and T-Rex actually didn't share the planet. They would have never met.
Yes, and in fact, you are closer in time to T-Rex than T-Rex is to Stegosaurus.
Because T-Rex was at the end of the Cretaceous, yes?
Yes, 66 million years ago. And Stegosaurus was about 150. So the world, if you were to go back in a time machine, the world that T-Rex inhabited would probably be much more familiar than the one Stegosaurus inhabited, because there were flowering plants when T-Rex was around, birds in the air, all sorts of small mammals and turtles and stuff. But in the Jurassic with Stegosaurus, no flowering plants, or only the very earliest flowering plants, but nothing. The forest would look completely different, dominated by seed ferns and ginkgo and conifers. The birds are all only the earliest birds exist, and they're all long-tailed with sharp teeth and claws. And it's a world dominated by giants. It would be very different.
It is remarkable when you think about it. I mean, obviously, we've mentioned mass extinctions while we were talking, and obviously, I think a lot of people are completely unfamiliar with some of the devastating effects of, or in fact, just the existence of such things as mass extinctions. And you also spoke about the role that volcanism has played. Would you then say that volcanism has been responsible for most of the mass extinction events that we know of?
That's tricky. I would say, so there are 5 mass extinction events that are recognized in Earth's past. There's the 6th, which is debated if that's a real mass extinction. It's certainly an extinction, but that's the current one. But geologically, we have 5. In the Ordovician, in the Devonian, the big Permian one, the Triassic, Jurassic, and then the Asteroid in the Cretaceous. And I would say that our current evidence suggests strongly that at least 2 of these are related to volcanism.
Okay.
The Ordovician one, as you go back farther in time, interrogating like cause and effect becomes harder and harder.
It's difficult.
So the Ordovician one, there's a big climate cooling event that happens in the Ordovician that might be related to it, to an impact or volcanism. There's the Devonian one I'm not super familiar with.
Okay.
But the Permian Triassic one, the Great Dying, that's almost certainly a volcanic event. That's the Siberian traps.
Yes. Yeah.
Which again, another one of these huge, effusive, flowy lava flows that's releasing tons of gas and changing the climate. And then, of course, the Triassic Jurassic one also seems to be related to volcanism. And even the there was a debate for a long time, and it still persists in some corners, about the role of volcanism in the extinction of the dinosaurs.
Yeah, I know.
There are these Indian large effusive volcanic provinces. Ooh.
Or the Deccan traps. Yes,
like they were erupting right about the same time. A lot of the current work that at least that I think holds up seems to mostly suggest that it's a big asteroid impact. That's really doing it. There have been papers that have suggested that maybe were dinosaurs declining and then they got hit by an asteroid that knocked them out. I don't think so. I think that's just kind of interpreting a very limited fossil record at face value.
It's very easy to do that, isn't it?
Yeah.
I've read articles that suggest that maybe it was like a 1-2 punch. So the asteroid landed, and then you got the flood basalt eruptions in
Yep,
India.
that seems reasonable. My roommate once said this, and I'm going to steal something he said, but I thought it was funny, which is, it's kind of like asking, if the Roman Empire was invaded by aliens, would it matter if they were invaded by aliens during the peak of their civilization, or like the collapse of the Roman Empire, which is, if you're getting hit by a huge rock from outer space,
Yeah.
you're probably going out either way.
Anyway, the flood basalt eruption just kind of added to your pain, if you like.
Yeah, exactly.
It is really a remarkable thing, and it kind of makes you realize that life on Earth is almost, to all intents and purposes, hanging by a thread at all times.
It is simultaneously incredibly tenacious and incredibly fragile.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely.
It will persist through horrific.
What?
Yeah, go ahead.
It would have had to, because obviously everything that I've read about the Permian extinction has just left me completely gobsmacked that this thing actually.
It's a disconnect that I kind of see often amongst people who are like, the climate curious crowd, those people who are like, sure, maybe the climate's changing, but that's, it's natural, it's what always has happened, which, like, yeah, it has always changed, but like, and life will persist, right? Like the current climate change trends aren't going to cause the extinction of mankind or anything like that. But they will reshape the ecosystem.
Of course.
And like the idea that like these climbing events, because life persists through them, it'll be fine. I'm like, yeah, but it's often transformed in a profound way.
In a very profound way. And my answer, I always say to people, let's even assume that there is no evidence of any climate crisis, if you like. What is wrong with saying we know what the effects of pumping greenhouse gases into the atmosphere is? Let's do something about it. What is wrong with that?
Vested financial interests.
It's insane. It's actually insane.
Very frustrating. We have a very big climate science cohort here at Yale, and it's always fun to talk to them. I always like to pick their brain. I'm like, how bad is it? And they're like, it's not good.
Yeah, it's not good. Well, you know what?
But they're doing hard work over there. Noah Planotsky, he's doing all this carbon capture stuff. So we'll see.
Fantastic. Right. I don't want to keep you too long, because I can talk to a paleontologist for the next week.
I mean, if you have any other pressing questions, I've got a little more time I can kill.
Okay.
I'm just going into the lab later, so this is. Well,
there are questions that I have for myself personally, and obviously I know that your area of expertise is early crocodilians, but as you can probably see from the stuff that I post tons of stuff about prehistoric animals anyway. So my first question is, what the hell are Parareptiles?
That's a great question. I have to write a specimen sampling request for one, because I've
really?
Pallets that's at the American Museum. So Parareptiles are this really interesting group of reptiles called that's informally called Parareptiles.
Okay.
They're this group that actually evolves pretty early in reptile evolution. And I should say, so I have a good friend of mine who also is one of the graduate students here. Her name's Kelsey Jenkins, and she does a ton of work on this group of Parareptiles.
Wow!
And she's fantastic. So I'll just plug her. But anyway, Parareptiles are this group of these Parareptiles, and they're the biggest they get. And they're not really closely related to any living reptiles. They're kind of this first early pulse of reptiles that happens before the Triassic in the Permian. And they are these big, heavy set,
ugly.
kind of. It's they're so archaic. It's really hard to compare them to anything. For a while, they were thought to be related to turtles.
I can see that.
So this is not accepted anymore, but the idea was that within reptiles, there are kind of these four skull conditions. There are things that have two holes in their head that we call diapsids. These are your lizards, snakes, crocodiles, birds, dinosaurs, pterosaurs, all that. I said reptiles. I should have said egg-laying animals. There are four conditions. There are your synapsids, single holes. We're synapsids. All mammals. There's a condition called euryapsids, which is very similar to the single hole. That's in some marine reptiles that don't need to worry about. And then there's anapsids. These are animals that lack holes behind their eye, I should say. So these are holes for muscle attachment. Turtles don't have any holes behind their eyes for muscle attachment, and are for a very long time thought to be anapsids. And these parareptiles also lack holes behind their head for muscle attachment. So like Parareptiles, like Scutosaurus, which is one of the bigger ones. So for a long time it was thought, oh, maybe turtles are part of this early reptile group, which we found earlier turtles now in the Triassic, and it turns out that they have holes that get closed up as they evolve. So they are diapsids. They're probably closely related to archosaurs, so reptile like crocodiles and dinosaurs and stuff. They're not so and so not closely related to parareptiles. But yeah, so Parareptiles in summary are kind of these large barrel-bodied, robust herbivores with kind of these incredible display structures in some of them that were around from, I think, the middle to late Permian. And then with the Great Dying, almost all of those parareptiles go extinct, except for some small lizard-like ones that kind of persist into the Triassic for just a little bit of time before they eventually also go extinct. But a weird group.
Yeah, they are a very weird group, because I remember the one I saw was Cotylerhynchus.
Oh,
and I remember thinking, oh, damn, you're ugly.
Cotylerhynchus is the one with the small head, right?
Yes, I assumed. It's only until I saw a Scutosaurus that I realized that they don't all have small heads.
So Cotylerhynchus is not a parasaur.
Oh, is it not?
No, it's one of the early mammal relatives. It's a synapsid, but it's also a big, robust early herbivore. Yeah, they're also bizarre.
They're very bizarre. I actually read that it was a parasaur, so that's interesting. I'm going to have to do some more. So what are they then? What are they related to? Mammals more than.
Yes, so they're more close. They're kind of in the same early radiation of things like Dimetrodon and stuff like that.
So they're more related to pelycosaurs then.
Yes, and which in turn more closely related to mammals.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's very weird, and possibly partially like semi. I've seen hypotheses that they were like maybe living a bit like hippos.
Oh, okay, that's a new one.
I'm not sure if that's more than just like speculation or anything, but that's just something I've seen. Yeah. Hold on, I'm looking up the group's name because now I've forgotten the group's name. But these are they're Caseyosaurs. There we go.
Yeah, actually, I know the name.
The earliest groups of synapsids.
Wow, it is actually quite remarkable when you think of the immense diversity of these ancient reptiles. Because I've come across so many different names, and I don't even know how you guys keep up. So have you done any work on, say, early, I suppose they're called stem mammals, like Gorgonopsians?
No, I have not. It's mammal land.
Yeah. So it's not your thing.
Yeah, they get. Like if you keep it within reptiles, you can usually keep track of most of the anatomy. But once you get into mammals, they're fascinating. And I do teach a vertebrate paleontology course here for the undergraduate. So
really? Do you? Wow.
Familiarity with the group and some of the morphological trends, but I don't do any actual work with those early mammal relatives.
Fantastic. So you said that. Thank you. You said you'd been to the Karoo. Have you been once or numerous times? And what was the experience like?
I've been twice. I went first with kind of an expeditionary fieldwork team. Oh God, in like 2016, I think.
Okay.
Very early in my like, I guess, more serious paleontology career. While I was still an undergraduate, and that was the one where we didn't find anything. But
oh, that's a shame.
Our field work was in Mapungubwe National Park, so we just drove around and looked at elephants instead, which was great. So not a bad trip. The second time, and we did all this work affiliated with the University of Witwatersrand in Johannesburg.
Okay.
So Jonas Schwarne and a group of affiliated paleontologists hosted us. Great people. Anyway, yeah. So the second time we went to Lesotho, based on a few different lines of inquiry, including the notes left that I discussed earlier.
Yeah, by the priest, yes.
That was much more productive. We spent a week or two getting a Massospondylus, so one of these early sauropod relatives out. We found a nest, a dinosaur nest with eggs that had been like eroded, so they're in cross section. And then, as is customary in fieldwork, and this is a pretty common joke amongst paleontologists, but you find the best thing you find is 2 days before you have to leave. So you're trying to get it out of the ground in a panic. So we found there's this great site that's like a big amphitheater that was just like overflowing with bones in this one layer. And we got out what we could, but there was early ornithischians, a little theropod, all sorts of good stuff.
Wow.
But very good field work. We had much more productive field work in Lesotho than we did in South Africa. But, you know.
So thank you for that. So just out of curiosity, because most people don't understand the kind of work that goes into actually excavating a fossil, could you kind of give us just a brief description? Because most people don't understand that they're not actually bones. They are rock.
Yes. And they're not
in the shape of bones.
And yeah, and kind of one of the fundamental misunderstandings I think people have about how that fieldwork works is you're not digging them out of the dirt. I wish we were digging them out of the dirt.
Yeah, that would be easy, wouldn't it?
We're removing them from from stones. So in Lesotho, a lot of the material is in this kind of mudstone that forms these paleosols, so ancient soil horizons. And you'll get like fossilized root traces and stuff, which is pretty cool. But essentially what happens is you'll be walking up and down an outcrop for an hour, and then you'll be like eyes on the ground looking for flakes of bone, anything poking out of the rock. And if you see something, first thing you do is you try to figure out what you found. Is it a hand or is it a leg bone? And then you see its direction. Is it coming out of the rock or is it going into the rock?
Into the rock.
If it's going into the rock, it means you probably have more of a skeleton. Then you're going to start just kind of very carefully figuring out the dimensions of your fossil. So you're going to dig in and around. You want to see, it's like, okay, I have a leg. If I go this way, am I going to find a hand? Am I going to find like a neck, a head, a tail this way? So you have to figure out like the dimensions of what you found, and this will take days of going back to the site and kind of cleaning, and then okay, it looks like we have.
And you're not digging with a shovel; you're digging with a pickaxe.
Yes, a pick, often a rock hammer to clear stuff. So then you have a rough idea of what your dimensions of this fossil are. What you do then is what we call pedestaling. You dig a trench around your fossil, and these are often coming out of a hillside. So you kind of cut back into the hill, and then you dig under, and you pedestal the fossil. So it's on this it's slightly, the big block that your fossil's in is on this narrower pedestal. And when you're at this stage, you're applying wet paper towels to the surface, and then you put a plaster jacket over the top, because you're going to be digging and eventually have to flip it.
Okay.
So you plaster the top, plaster rolls in water. You have a little Ziploc bag in the field, and you wrap them. It's a lot of fun. You get filthy. And then once you've jacketed the top, you keep undercutting, and then you will flip the jacket and then wrap the other side. And then you make your jacket, which you'll then either walk or drive out of the field, depending on the size. I remember the massive spondylus we were excavating in Lesotho. The day we got it out was a day after we had been taken out by some of our guides drinking, and I had a horrid hangover. And I just remember there were four people in various states of misery dragging this enormous block down a mountain.
Having to do this with a hangover, and how long does it normally take then? Would you say for an average sized fossil to come out of the ground?
So the massive spondylus with a team of, I'll say 5 people, took about 8 days, 9 days.
Wow.
From that's from where we were like, oh, here it is, to it's out.
Wow.
Yeah, so it can take a while. If you have a big team, it can go faster. The rock we were working in is also very hard. So if it's a softer stone, it can go more quickly. But yeah, we were working in a tough stone.
That's amazing. And so have you got any other expeditions upcoming anytime soon?
Yeah, so Yale likes to do most of its field work in the United States because you can keep the fossils you find. So the work we were doing in Lesotho, we had an agreement with the government because they're building a museum there.
Yes, I read about that.
Send your stuff. It's going to be housed in Wits until it's done, but they'll send it back. In China, you'll dig stuff up, you can look at it, but it will be housed in China.
In China,
so
yes.
Everybody likes to do their field work in the States because you can keep the fossils. So last summer we were in New Mexico in a Triassic layer. This summer we'll be going to Colorado.
Okay.
Looking for some small dinosaur sites, and I will be in Mongolia, but not for field work. I have to go look at some specimens for a project.
Okay. Do you mind me asking what specimens exactly it is you're going to look at?
Sure. Yeah. I'm looking at a bunch of Velociraptor specimens for a project, for an upcoming exciting project about Velociraptor, which will be announced at SVP this year.
Interesting. Just out of curiosity, because early crocodilians are your thing, because I'm still trying to find one and I haven't been successful. What would be a book that you could recommend that would be a good one to pick up about early crocodiles?
If you're interested in early crocodilian evolution, and I mean like the stuff that's happening in the Jurassic, like after the Triassic. So in the Shadow of Dinosaurs, Jim Clark, my advisor, has a chapter in that about early crocodilians that's very good.
Okay.
Yeah, in the Shadow of Dinosaurs, I think it is, or it's the Shadow.
Okay.
Hold on, let me see if I have.
I'll look for that. I'm gonna put it on the screen anyway when I do an edit.
I don't think I have it on hand. There's not a ton that's been written about them, unfortunately.
I noticed that because I have looked, and I haven't found. Dinosaurs seem to have got all the press and
yeah, Yeah, I mean, Paul Sereno, probably anything by Paul has some mention of the Notosuchians he's found. But yeah, it's unfortunately underwritten about, unless you want to read a 125-page monograph about them that someone wrote.
So are Notosuchians the same as Thalattosuchians?
No. So they're closely related. So within, we have kind of these successive groups of crocodilians.
Okay. So
we have kind of all the weird Triassic stuff is down here on the tree. Or this way. Then we have what we call crocodilomorphs. So crocodilomorphs are all these extinct things and living crocodiles. The earliest ones of these crocodilomorphs are the things I work on mostly. These are these leggy crocs that look like a cross between a crocodile and a greyhound. We call them Sphenosuchians. Sphenosuchians, yeah. We have a great one here at the Peabody that I'm doing some work on actually today. We haven't named it yet, but that should be coming at some point. But right outside of that is the next kind of big group that we call crocodiliforms, and this is from mostly all the stuff in the Jurassic onward, and there's all these extinct groups, and as you get closer and closer to living crocodiles. So Thalattosuchians are pretty primitive within that group of crocodiliforms, but they are the marine radiation.
Yeah, I know they're marine, yes.
And some of them look a little marine, and some of them look really marine, like they have tail flukes, like a shark.
Yeah, some of them have flippers, don't they?
Yes, yeah. So the Metriorhynchids become
Hmm.
super marine. The teleosaurs are a little more crocodile-y, but some of them get very marine. And then a bit farther up the tree are what we call Notasuchians, and these are all terrestrial or
Okay.
semi-aquatic, with maybe one or two exceptions. And these are things like Arepasuchus, Armadillosuchus, Notasuchus, Simasuchus, which is this adorable little rabbit-sized one from Madagascar with like a bulldog's face. It's got a very short little face.
Silosuchus.
Simo, Simo Suchus.
Oh, I think I've seen it. Yeah, I've seen
It's
it.
adorable.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Wow.
and there are also these big predatory things called Barosuchids and Sebasuchids.
Okay, I haven't heard of
They
them.
kind of look like Postasuchus. If
Okay, I know Postasuchus.
animals a bit closer to living crocodiles tried to make Postasuchus again.
But Postasuchus was the one that almost looked like a dinosaur, but wasn't.
Yes. Yes.
How do you keep up, Alex?
It's we all have our own interest, our own areas.
Wow, it's just I mean I'm interested, but it's just I'm amazed and in awe of what you do, because I'm like, how do you even keep up? It's incredible. I would like to. Oh, okay, this is what I wanted to say. Could you keep me posted about anything your projects, or anything that is postable? Because obviously I like to. Sorry, go on.
Do you have a Twitter?
Sorry?
Are you on Twitter?
Of course I'm on Twitter. What do you do I not follow you on Twitter?
I don't. I have a Twitter. You should follow me. I post about my work on there. I've kind of shifted away from Facebook.
Okay, I probably follow you already. I'm sure I wouldn't be that inefficient, but I'm gonna go check.
My username is just at a Reubenstahl. So.
Okay, so just JUST.
No, sorry. My username is just like the at a Reubenstahl.
Oh, okay.
So I'll look, and then my last name.
Yeah, I'll look you up. Mine is just Curiosity Feeds, because I couldn't get Curiosity Feeds the cat, which was quite annoying. But I would absolutely love to follow you, because actually your specific discipline is one that I'm really, really fascinated with. And like I said, when I went to the Natural History Museum in Paris, it was literally one of my most exciting trips to a museum.
I also have a YouTube channel.
Oh, you do?
So a bunch of my friends, my roommate Dalton, who works on lizards, my friend and co-author James Napoli, who's he's a tyrannosaur guy.
Okay.
He's got some very big stuff coming that I'm sure will excite people.
Okay.
And then Amelia Zietlow, who she's at the American Museum. She works on mosasaurs, and our mutual friend Scott Johnson, who's a preparator at Harvard. We have a little YouTube channel called The Skeleton Crew. We're at about 4.1 thousand subscribers, so we're kind of growing.
Oh, you're gonna grow another one, and I'm gonna post it on my page, and so that some other.
So the channel is mostly at this point because we have very busy schedules.
Of course.
We tried to start it as like we discussed papers that came out, and nobody watched those. So are you at all familiar with the game Jurassic Park Evolution 2?
No.
So it's essentially a park building game, and there's like 100 different dinosaurs you can make. And what we've been doing is we're going through the game and like species by species, and we'll pull up a species and we'll essentially discuss, is this reflective of what the animal looks like?
Okay. That's interesting.
It's mostly just kind of, it's almost podcast-like in nature, where we just kind of discuss stuff about the group, stuff like that. We're going to try to change up what kind of videos we're making as our schedule become more free, but people seem to like it. So
well, fantastic. I will definitely go and look for the skeleton crew. Okay, I'll go and look for that, and I'll definitely subscribe. And I really, really appreciate you agreeing to do this interview.
Yeah, happy to.
I might ask you again in a couple of months or so. I'm obviously hoping to grow this channel. I essentially just want to do videos that will interest people in prehistoric fauna, because I think it's amazing. So thank you very much for agreeing to do this, Alex. I
Thank
won't
you
keep
for
you
having me.
any longer. Yeah, you've given me an hour and 11 minutes of your time, and I am very, very grateful. Thank you very much for your time. I'm going to post your Twitter and are you on Instagram as well?
I'm not on Instagram.
Okay, I'm going to, because I'm going to have to edit this later. So I'll put your Instagram and your Twitter and your YouTube on the screen so that my viewers can,
Sure.
go and have a look and subscribe and
I
join.
appreciate
Or no, listen, thank you. I appreciate your work, and I start again. I appreciate your work, and I appreciate you giving me your time. Thank you very much, and I'm sure we'll speak again very soon.
Like this we did.